Welcome aboard Rocket Ship, the platform with the most relevant content for competitive examinations. This is Rocket Ship IAS Lab and continuing with our series on answer writing for general studies papers of civil service main examination. We take up a question that you might come across in GS paper 2. Here goes the question. Without a renewed focus on qualitative aspects, promises of the Right of Children to Free and Compulsory Education Act will remain unfulfilled. Explain. So, as you can see that unlike the usual order of questions that UPSC throws at you, this question reverses the usual order actually. It first makes a point and after that you have to justify this point that it's qualitative aspects of education which are necessary to focus on so that we realize the true promises, we fulfill the promises of the Right to Education Act. So how we introduce our answer? Actually we are lucky here that we have a very important survey at our hands. You would probably know of its name. It's called the ACER survey, which is brought out by an important non-governmental organization Pratham. Anyway, the survey says that over half of children in 8 to 18 age group struggle with basic numeracy. That is, they cannot even divide 3-digit number by a one-digit number. The second point that it makes out that 25% of our children cannot read class 2 level text fluently even in their regional language. So it can be understood very well. Had it been the case that they could not read English language text, for an example, that could have been like mostly something that could have been understood. But they are not able to read text even in their own, you could say, mother tongue or even in their own regional vernacular language. That is really a matter of concern. So clearly we are missing on the education quality. This is when the Right of Children to Free and Compulsory Education, popularly called the RTE Act, has been in effect for about a decade and a half. It is also pertinent to note that some of the provisions of RTE Act aimed at improving the school education system. We are not leaving it at that. We are just not criticizing the RTE Act. We would rather point out some of the provisions which are welcome provisions which were made in the RTE Act to improve the school education system. What are these provisions? First, it brings back a welcome focus on teacher training through mandatory eligibility criteria. You would certainly be aware of the exams like CTET actually, the Central Teachers Eligibility Test, and its analogous State Teachers Eligibility Test, CTET and STET, etc., which are ultimately aimed at ensuring that the teachers who join the school education system are of a particular quality. They are eligible actually, they have some certain proficiency for teaching. Then this act, RTE Act, provides for monitoring of schools and their working by the National Commission for Protection of Child Rights. So it establishes a monitoring system too. Then it has established a school management committee in each school, in each government school, to include stakeholders like parents, teachers, local representatives for supervision and expert local educationists. You can understand very well that ultimately it's the parents who through their wards or children are the ultimate stakeholder of school education. Moreover, including the teachers into the school management committee is indeed necessary because ultimately they are the service provider. Then including the local level representative has the effect of supervising the teachers or the school, you could say administration, etc. And there is presence of some local educationists as expert members too. However, despite all these provisions, as demonstrated by the Acer findings, the progress has not been satisfactory. Reasons for unfulfilled promises, the unfulfilled objectives of the RTE Act can be summed up as: first, you can understand very well that the RTE Act focuses on quantitative aspects like school infrastructure, teacher-student ratio, etc. While all of this is quite welcome, but it neglects qualitative aspects to a great deal. For an example, educational outcome of the student. Then supervision and accountability has always been a problem in government school education system, the government schools actually. We are not saying it here explicitly, but the teacher union has become so powerful that they have their way wherever an attempt to make them more accountable, to hold them accountable, is held. Then there is lack of choice for the children in school enrollment. In effect, they are forced to enroll in the school that is nearest to their homes. Then obviously there is some statewide disparities which point to issue of state capacity. Again, we are not naming name here, but in one of the states, you know which one, there was a large number of teacher degrees which were found to be fake. Such is the odd state of affairs in that schools, in that state's school administration department. So these things again point to a statewide, you could say disparities. Not all states are performing the same in educational attainment of children, and this is only because there is a difference in state capacity as far as enforcement of rules or ensuring quality, etc. are concerned. Now, taking up these points in detail, as we were talking about, a focus on physical infrastructure like an optimum teacher-student ratio, etc., school infrastructure, etc., is welcome. This should not be at the disregard of, there should not be a disregard of qualitative aspects like age-related learning outcomes. For an example, a child of particular age should have certain learning attainment. For an example, he should be able to read certain texts of particular standard, or he should have basic numeracy skills, and so on. So these things should not be neglected actually. Then supervision of teachers and holding them accountable has proved a difficult task in the realities of the political economy. Again, we were not being explicit here, and you do not have to dwell too much on this point actually, but due to the organized nature of teacher unions, their political mobilization actually, and sometimes they are even mobilizing politically. So due to all these reasons, it's very difficult to hold them accountable. Then children do not have much choice when it comes to choosing a school. They are compelled to enroll at the nearest school. Actually, it's such a paradox that given a chance, and had they have their capacity, if they could really afford it, the children and their parents would have their children enrolled at pricey private schools rather than the free government schools. Such is the stark difference in the quality between a private school and a government school. Then there is stark statewide differences in learning outcomes of pupils. This points to a systemic crisis in some of the states. That is the entire affair of their state education department. The school education department is rotten actually. This points to a systemic crisis and a want of state capacity, as we were just talking about. A state capacity in terms of like enforcing accountability or ensuring quality, etc. Still, as we roll out the National Education Policy 2020, a few suggestions can be made. to improve the state of affairs. What are these suggestions? The NEP itself talks of catch-up programs for pupils falling behind. Actually, what we can do, we can bring out some programs, for example, some extra classes and things like those, something that would be more adaptable to the pace of learning of a student who is falling behind, so that ultimately we can bring these pupils who are falling behind to the level of students who we find are performing well. We must devise an incentive based system to reward high performing teachers. Actually, this would serve two goals. Actually, many people do criticize the low level of salaries that we pay to teachers. That may be indeed the case. Many a times that's the case too. What we can do instead, that we can provide some form of incentive for good performing teachers, that would not only incentivize for performing well, but also attract better talent to school education, because they would be paid well in term in form of incentives and things like those. Giving children greater choice in school enrollment. To be very frank, we are talking of things like school vouchers, which they can use to get themselves enrolled into private schools. Then empowering parents in conjunction with local bodies to make teachers more accountable. Actually, the local bodies and their representatives, these are the people who enjoy quite a deal of legitimacy and have quite some social capital in the local area. And actually, these are the only people who can enforce some form of accountability from the teachers, who can extricate some form of accountability from the teachers. Then we must talk of this modern phenomenon that digital and computer literacy must become part of the modern education system. We are not mentioning it anywhere in the actual write-up, but these things are very, very important, that we should focus on digital and computer literacy, digital education and computer literacy, digital proficiency, and so many other things. However, before we call it a day, we have a task for you. As part of your homework, you are supposed to make small handwritten notes on major findings of the ESA report. We are making your task easier here. We would discuss two more points. Two we have already discussed in the opening paras of this write-up. Two more points we are discussing that the ESA has found. First is, less than 6% of the pupils have opted for vocational training. So this point is useful whenever you come across a question on a skill gap in India, that less than 6% of the pupils of the teenage group actually have opted for vocational education. Then this point is also pertinent, that male pupils are more sensitized about digital online safety. This point is also pertinent because nowadays we have many times heard the news of girl children falling prey to unwholesome actors online. So this is again very, very pertinent, that they have some sense of digital online security and safety actually. So these are some of the points of the ESA report. We would remind you again that you are supposed to make a small handwritten notes on the major findings of the ESA report. Do not include more than 3-4 points. 4 we have already discussed. A few more points, 2-3 would be sufficient for you. Anyway, this is how we sum up our lecture for today. We hope to meet you again in a few days with a new lecture. As usual, we wish you all the best. Thank you.